Welcome to this demonstration of ChemADVISOR's EHS Authoring Tool. The tool is also known as EHS-AT. In addition to a general overview, I'll also highlight some of the new features in our latest release. The tool is fully hosted, and the screen that we're looking at now is the first one you'd see after logging in. You'll have two folders here. The first one's for the authoring tool itself. The other one is for Lolly Desktop. Now, Lolly is ChemADVISOR's regulatory database that contains over 5,500 lists from over 120 countries. The data both from Lolly and our transportation database are integrated into EHS-AT, but we also provide you with this direct access to Lolly so you can fully utilize the database. Now that we've entered Lolly, you can see that there are a number of things you can do. You can run queries against the database with specific substances you're interested. You can look up CAS numbers. You can actually go in and take a look at the lists themselves. For example, we'll open up ACGIH if you need to review the list. You can also see changes that we have made since the last update. For example, in the advisory list, you can see changes that have been added there, or changes that have been made there, or you can come and take a look at something that may have actually been added and take a look there. So there's a lot to do in Lolly, but let's go ahead and go back to EHS-AT. So we'll navigate back up to the other menu and click into the Authoring Tool folder. This first screen contains change logs, reference manuals, user guides, plus our phrase manager. EHS-AT comes with an English phrase library, and other libraries of different languages are also available. But we recognize the fact that a user is likely going to want to add their own phrases, and this is the way you can do that. This little utility will allow you to add phrases. Which brings us down to the last two buttons here. These are both for EHS-AT. There's a test environment that we have, and so whenever you have perhaps a new template or you've requested a new set of phrases, different language set rather, or if there's a software update, those are applied here first, and this gives you as the user the opportunity to go in, make sure you understand what the change has been, it's working the way that you expect it to work, and then you will approve that before we move it into your production environment. Speaking of, let's enter the production environment. You begin in your inbox. Now each user has their own inbox that contains work that's in progress for them. Once you've completed working on a document, you can finalize it using our workflow process, and that is something that can be customized to meet your business practices. And once a document's been finalized, then it's removed from the inbox. You can also reassign documents for other people to work on. Perhaps you need someone else to take over for you if you're going to be out of the office for a bit. So there are a number of ways to have documents come in and out of your inbox. Another thing to take a look at here is being able to come up. Perhaps you would like to, say, you want to start a new SDS. Here's one way to do that. And this is going to open up something that allows you to associate templates with it. The tool comes with the OSHA GHS template and the EUCLP template, but there are a variety of other templates. Let me scroll through here for a moment to see there are a variety of other ones that are available to you in addition. And so this is one way to create a document. You can also click on this and essentially get right back to the same screen. So just depending on how you'd like to navigate through. But let's go ahead and open up a document that we have down here already. You could just highlight and double click there, and that's going to come in and open us into a new window, and this window is actually inside of that document now. So you see we've got a few changes up here in how you can navigate and some choices that you have, one of which is the WYSIWYG. What you see is what you get. That's our preview that we'll take a look at in a bit. We also have help available. When I showed you on the first screen as we entered in here, there were some reference manuals. That one of those is the help, and so if you click here it takes you right to that user manual again. Again, the file, you have a different set of options here now that you're actually in a document for things you can do, things like save as I mentioned a moment ago, you can submit documents or reassign documents to other people. These are some different ways of being able to do that. But let's go ahead and take a look. Actually, I'd like to go back in there. And I mentioned the templates. Right now, this document is assigned just to the OSHA GHS template. So let's go ahead and add China and EU CLP to this one. And so we'll submit that into the system, and it will come back and give us a new little box here, and that's just going to let you be able to keep up with the ones that you're actually working on in the system. So you have the opportunity to either add or take away templates for documents that you're working on, but I think part of the beauty of the system is being able to actually put all of your data in one spot and then tell the system the kind of output that you want at the end. So you don't have to sit there and individually author all three of those documents. All the information is going to go in here, and at the end, once you have all the information in, once you've run the rules, you'll just simply tell the system which one you'd like to take a look at. I'd mentioned the phrase manager a moment ago, and I'd like to point out another way of adding phrases into the system that are not through the phrase manager. So let me expand this. Let's take a look at material name. So this is just that. This is the name of the product that you're working on. But you'll notice here we're calling this the translatable text field. And this is a place where you can add and here, this was just adding it in English. These are things that you would not normally put in a standard phrase library because you're not going to be reusing them. So things like product names, that's something that's quite unique generally. The other thing you have an option here to do is actually translate that. The material name if you wanted to do something like that. So you'd simply come here and click on the language that you were interested in, and of course you could do multiple ones. And now you see we have a new section here where if you wanted to, you could copy and paste in the Chinese text that you would like that to be. So this is just showing you that there are different types of ways that we use to handle how phrases are added. Many times it will be through the phrase manager because you're going to maintain them in the standard phrase library, but there are other times where they're really not appropriate, where it's really not what you would think of as a standard phrase, and so we give you the translatable text that will allow you to enter it and also enter translations for whatever you've put in. So let's move on from the material name here and go into the section 1 fields. Now, as you see, this is the manufacturer details, and there's certainly a way you can come in if you wanted to here and add this yourself. But many times, and most of the time, once you've created this once, you'd really want to just be able to reuse it over and over. So let me show you how we can do that. I'll close that one out. And let's go over here, and you're going to see an option where I did a right click and you can add a reference. And this is something you can do many places in the tool. So if you've created a section that you'd like to reference in another document, so if I like the first aid that I created for a particular product and I'm starting on a new document, I might want to reference that and just have those phrases be associated between those documents. And in this case, what we're doing is adding a reference. Since we've already created some manufacturer details, we're going to pick one of these and go ahead and say this is what we'd like to use for this document. So it allows you to create it once, reuse it where it's appropriate. It also gives you an easy way if you need to update the data and have all the documents that are using this particular one receive that update all at the same time. So let's move on to what is going to be probably the most important section that we're going to take a look at during this overview, and that's the composition section. It doesn't sound like it's as important as you might think it is, but you're going to find that you can do an awful lot of the document from this one area. And I've already started here, and then truly it is composition at this point, and I'm going to go ahead and add another component. You don't need to put the hyphens in if you'll just enter the cast number that you have. And I'm going to tab over, and you saw that the system has added this for you. So the Lolly database that I mentioned earlier, the system is actually taking a look at the cast number that I've entered and associating it with the data that we have in Lolly for that. And we'll go ahead and add a percentage there. And now let's go to composition roll-up. So this is the very basic detail that we've added here first for the composition. So let's move from the Composition Details tab to the Composition Rollup. Now this is an area where you're going to have some options in allowing you to control how those components are actually going to be revealed on the documents themselves and how they're going to be used in the various calculations for things like GHS classifications within the document. So I'm going to come all the way over here to the restrictions and point out that you have a number of options. Now, non-confidential is what both of the components are set at right now, and that means that the chemical names that we're seeing, that display name that you see, all of that information is going to be revealed in the document where it's appropriate. See the chemical names coming through, you'll see the percentages, and here we've actually done a display percent, so to give that one a range as opposed to what we're doing with the actual percentage. But all of this information will be coming through on the document and will all be used in the various calculations that would happen. Now, you may want to hold something confidential, and if you do that, you'll notice we've had a couple of changes. We now have a drop down here for the display for the CAS, so you can change that now to confidential. Perhaps you're holding it as a trade secret, but giving you the options here to change that from actually revealing the cast number itself. Another thing you can do is actually suppress a component, and this completely takes it out. You will not see it appearing on the document, and you won't have it used in any of the calculations. This is something perhaps you might have some very reactive chemistry where you might want to enter all the components that are there, that even though you know several of them may react completely out, maybe an option there to allow you to track all the components that you actually started with. You also have these last two. This is composition excluded and composition only. You may have a component for composition excluded where you don't want to have the component listed in section 3, but you may want to have it appear in other places in the document, or the reverse, you only want it to appear in the composition, but you may not want it to appear and be used for the rest of the documents. You do have a number of options here to let you adjust how different components are either appear on the documents or how they're used within the calculations for the documents. But for right now, let's set both of these to non-confidential. And let's move on to some details. Now again, I had mentioned a couple of times about Lolly data being used, and that's what you're seeing right here. So for this particular component, we do have a little bit of physical data coming through from Lolly. So we can move to classifications, and what we're seeing here is information coming through. Looks like we have flammable liquids. And as you know, the U.S. does not self-classify, but countries like Japan do. And so it looks like Japan has self-classified this as a Category 4. And we do allow this information to come through based on a hierarchy to give you information. If other countries have decided to self-classify, that may be information that you're interested in. You also have the option of overriding that data if it's something that you're not, if it's something that you don't wish to use. We also have inventory data, and here we have this showing up on a number of different inventories. Let's also take a look maybe. And so we also have some information coming through, it looks like, from the EU and from Russia for this one as well. So this is all information for the component itself. And we have the same type of and we can take a look after we accept changes. So let's go look at the product properties now. It's going to be the same type of screen. It's just at the product level for this particular product. And I have added a couple of things in. I have identified this as a liquid and I have given it a flash point. So just a little bit of information on the product as a whole and the two components. And so with that, let's see where we'll go when we run the rules. So we'll click here and click Run Rules. And what we now have is the actual rule execution manager. In this case, we're going to go ahead and just select and run all the rules that are in here that are available. And there we'll go. You'll notice down here at the bottom we have something called the Rule Progress Bar. And as we're talking, as I'm talking, and as you see, it's starting to turn green, and so the rules are running. And that looks like it's very close, and we'll take this. Oh, that looks fine. And we'll go ahead and accept the changes there. And so now we'll go back to that preview, the WYSIWYG that I mentioned earlier. And let's open that up. And so here's the document that we've created. Right now we're looking at the OSHA template, but we could easily decide we'd like to take a look at the EU version. And you'll get the template there. And same thing if we decided to look at the version for China. But let's go back to the OSHA version. And with just a couple of components and running the rules, we have the information coming through. Looks like we're coming out with that flammable liquid based on the information that we had for the US. And there's our composition that we started with. Now you'll see the difference here in the EU is that that Category 4 is not one that they adopted, so you don't have this information coming through for them. And then for China, looks like we may also have a possible aspiration hazard coming through there. So different countries, different templates, all the same information going in, and then having the information that you've provided plus the rules coming through to show you, based on the different country, how different they can be. So something else you can do here is use the compare functionality. And this is something that we've enhanced since our last major release. As you see, you've got the ability to choose between any SDS that you might want to compare against, or the last saved, which is what we're doing here, as you see, last saved versus the current version, or the last published if you had documents that you had already completed at some point and published them after you'd finalized them. You also have the ability here, of course, to look at any of the versions of the document that you're working on. So let's take a look and see where we see a change here. And this time I'm just going to scroll down. So haven't really made any changes there. But what I did do was I've added some first aid. So as you see, the last save version, we hadn't added any first aid in, and now we have first aid. Some of the first aid is now appearing here. So it's highlighted in green, indicating that's been inserted. If it was in red, it was deleted. If it was yellow, it was modified. So to really give you an idea of what some of the changes you might see would look like, I'm going to go ahead and pick any document. So this is not the same product being compared. They're two completely separate documents, but it will clearly illustrate, as you see, how different something can be depending on how many changes you've made. Something you can do here is navigate through using the next button, and this is going to have a lot of different changes. One thing to point out here is even the symbols, if they have been changed, for example, this one is outlined in that red highlight, so you know that it was deleted compared to this new document over here, the current document that we started with, that now is indicating that that's been inserted compared to the previous document. We'll click down just a little bit further. So lots of changes since they have very different hazards. So you'll have lots of differences there. But it's just a very easy way to visually compare two documents and let you know what's changed, and not only what, but whether it was an addition, whether it was something that was deleted. It makes it very easy to do reviews. So let's go back now and go back into the system, and let's take a look at another one of the newer features. So now we've moved into another section of a different document, and we're taking a look at first aid measures, because I'd like to show now how we actually pick phrases for sections where you need to do that. As you saw in the preview of that document, lots of phrases came through, but those were being driven by rules. Now we've got sections where we're going to go in and actually pick some phrases. And so here in first aid, I think the first thing we'll do is see if we can do a quick search. And let's look for outdoors. And then we'll search. And we have one selection there, so we'll go ahead and get that. And what you may have just noticed pop up is we've had some additional phrases show up over here to the right. And what that's indicating is when I've picked this phrase before in the set of documents that I have, these are some other phrases that I also seem to pick at the same time. So the system is just simply saying, you know, these may be things you also might want to consider using and adding down here. Another thing we can do is add another phrase. So now let's go ahead and select another phrase to add, and as you saw, because now I have two of them, I have another few selections that I've commonly used when I've picked these two phrases. Another couple of things I'd like to point out while we're here. So you have some other options here on this screen, and one of those is going to be deciding whether or not the phrases you've selected are actually perhaps in another language that you're interested in. So let's take a look here and say, is this also available in German? And in this case, both of them are. If they weren't available in the language, they would have remained in English. So you'd be very easy for you to tell. Another thing you can take a look at for translations is in this column here, it's telling you how many languages those phrases are available in. So as we scroll down, you'll see that fewer and fewer translations are available. So they're ones where you may want to take a look and see if you can find a similar phrase that's already translated. We can do the same thing with translations as I did below. This is going to show a little bit differently. Uh, Actually, as you saw, all of those grayed out. and are not available in German, but all of these up above are. So it's an easy way as you're going and deciding, especially if you know that you're looking for translations, to go ahead while you're on the screen and decide whether or not you may have a phrase that's available that's already translated. This type of phrase picker screen that we've used here for first aid is also common in sections such as firefighting, accidental release, storage and handling, and other sections as you go down the sheet. So a number of sections use this same type of way of adding data through the phrase pickers. The next new feature I'd like to point out is our multi-level mixture referencing. So this is something that's useful if you actually have raw materials that some of them are mixtures themselves and you have different levels of them being added into your final product. So this is our first bit of composition that we have. We're going to call it level G, and it is 100% of this substance. And so the next thing we're going to take a look at is the something that's going to contain that. So now what we'd like to do is add this level G into another document. So here's the composition. We're going to have one component in there already, and now let's go after that level G that we just looked at. And so we're going to tell the system it's a mixture, and then we're going to reference. So we're going to come over here and actually click on that working document that we just looked at and submit that. And now you see that the system has now picked that up. So instead of taking a look into Lolly and saying it's a cast number and we'll pull information in, we've identified this as a mixture and it's been able to go out and pull the appropriate information in. So let's make it a 50-50 mixture and take a look at composition roll-up. So instead of seeing level G, the system has now drilled into the actual substance, so you know it's a 50-50 mixture of these two components. So that's taken you to a one level down. But now let's take a look at another substance that we're going to actually add in. This will be this level D is 100% another. We have another 100% substance coming through. So let's now put all of those together, and we'll go into the composition of this final level. So what we'd like to do here is add in that level M, and we'll tell the system again that it's a mixture, and it's going to give us the opportunity to come out here and connect to it. And then we'll bring in that level D, and again identify it as a mixture. And we'll submit that. And then for both of them, let's go ahead and add in some percentages. We'll put that M in at 51, and we'll put the other one in at 49%. And now let's take a look at composition roll-up to see what it's done. And as you see, it's now taken all of the composition that we put in and brought it out to where you can see exactly what's in the product appropriately. So as you see, it's now taken all of those, it's taken the three components that were in those various levels, brought them all, and it's calculated out the correct percentages for each of them. So this is a way that you could do another level and another level and another level, and it would all continue to come through appropriately. If you had formaldehyde in there in 2 or 3 different places, you would see formaldehyde in here at the appropriate percent covering all of them. So let's look at transportation now. We've made some enhancements to the system where within the transportation section you'll actually receive suggestions on possible UN numbers to use for classification. So in this first example, we're looking at 100% of a single substance, and we'll go ahead and look at the product properties for the substance, and we're going to see, since we've already run the rules, and as we see, we actually have picked one that is specifically listed, so we don't have any other optional choices to take a look at here. So what we'll need to do is go ahead and use that UN number that it's provided us, and we'll add it here, and then the system will bring us in the information off of the various transportation tables. So let's accept that change, and now you see there that that's overridden. And so let's go ahead and get details. And so now it's going out. Let me slide this back over. You'll see that we've got information coming in, and we've filled out what was necessary. We have the proper shipping name coming in since that was actually on the table, all the classification data, and the UN number. Previously, the system, previously you would had to have known your UN number in order to just enter it as we did there, but now the system's giving you a little bit of help.